Get ready for one of the most heart-stopping moments of our entire tale. Imagine Eamon Crowley clinging to the side of his little runabout, harpoon launcher in hand, while thunderheads roll across the sky and bullets zip overhead. This is the kind of white-knuckle action that defines Bayhaven's fight against the Black Anchor MC, and it's why you absolutely have to hear this story to the very end. Before we jump into the final twists and turns, we want to remind you to subscribe to our channel. Not only does it help us keep bringing you epic adventures like this, but you'll be the first to hear when our next thrilling story drops. After all, there's no shortage of bravery, tension, and heart in our lineup of tales. So buckle in and follow along, because the best is still to come, and we can't wait to share every triumphant, nerve-wracking second with you. Eamon Crowley had always considered himself just another farmer, carving out a living in the quiet coastal region of Bayhaven, Maine. He had plowed the fields behind his farmhouse for 15 years since retiring from a storied career as a marine rescue specialist, a past he rarely discussed with the neighbors who only knew him for his gentle demeanor and sun-beaten straw hat. If anyone looked closer, they might notice the efficiency in his movements or the clarity in his gaze. Small remnants of a life once spent racing across storm-tossed seas, coordinating rescues under brutal conditions, and wielding a harpoon launcher like an extension of his own arm. Few in Bayhaven ever asked about his history, assuming he was nothing more than a diligent farmer who preferred peaceful days. Yet, beneath his calm exterior, Eamon's mind remained keenly attuned to patterns of weather, waves, and human behavior, as sharp as it had been during his decades in the Coast Guard's elite rescue units. The trouble started in Bayhaven when the Black Anchor Motorcycle Club rolled in with the coastal fog about 6 months prior. The gang introduced itself as an organization looking to support local businesses by offering security advice and making vague promises to protect the town from unspecified threats. Though Bayhaven residents were far from naive, the MC's slick talk and menacing presence were enough to cower many of the fishermen and small shop owners who inhabited the sleepy harbor. Day by day, Eamon observed how the Black Anchor members positioned themselves, strolling down main streets, frequenting local diners for hours, and lurking around shipping docks near the old fish processing warehouse. Their leader, a silver-haired man with a scar down his cheek named Breaker Knox, commanded a quiet but ruthless discipline among his ranks, while his second-in-command, Riptide Rogers, was often the mouthpiece of their intimidation campaigns. Eamon's neighbor, Ted Caldwell, was one of the first to mention the steep dock fees the Black Anchor crew demanded. Ted tried to stand firm, refusing to pay. In response, he found his fishing gear ruined overnight, nets slashed, lines severed, and rotting fish heads strewn across his yard. It was a clear message that the MC planned to wring cash out of the community by any means necessary. Soon after fishermen reported missing equipment, farmers found livestock poisoned or stolen, and small eateries were forced to accept the gang's security contracts to stay safe. Murmurs of fear spread through Bayhaven, a town that had seen tough times before but never anything like this. A calculated operation seizing control piece by piece. Initially, Eamon hoped that local law enforcement would step up and assert authority. However, Bayhaven's police chief, Garvey Alden, seemed uninterested in mounting a serious effort to stop the gang. A curt man who wore his uniform pressed to perfection, Alden dismissed many of the complaints as simple civil disagreements, urging residents to find peaceful resolutions without official intervention. Those who pressed him for more action found themselves stonewalled or outright ignored. Eamon's daughter, Trish Crowley, recently promoted to lieutenant in the Bayhaven Harbor Patrol, was one of the few within law enforcement unwilling to remain idle. She tried to investigate the gang's background and track their suspicious activity in the marina. But each time she made progress, Chief Alden reassigned her or blocked her from proceeding further. Despite her father's warnings to keep herself safe, Trish's resolve only hardened. When rumors began circulating that the Black Anchor MC was looking to convert Bayhaven into a hub for something bigger than a local extortion racket, Eamon felt that old tension stirring in his gut, the same tension he had felt right before storms turned deadly out at sea. He sensed that danger was near, and that people like Breaker Knox and Riptide Rogers had not come to Bayhaven by chance. The day Eamon Crowley discovered his tractor vandalized, a dense morning fog had rolled off the Atlantic, draping the farmland in pale white. He'd risen before sunrise, just as he had every day since buying the property, to do routine checks on his equipment. The old John Deere tractor, sturdy, reliable, with freshly replaced tires, was integral to his modest operation. Standing before it, he immediately noticed the carefully sliced fuel lines and an engine block that looked as if someone had taken a crowbar to it. The damage was not random or merely impulsive. It was meticulous, done in such a way that Eamon couldn't possibly repair it quickly or cheaply. He surveyed every broken component, quietly noting how much knowledge of machinery this sort of sabotage required. "Looks like you got a nasty surprise," Ted Caldwell said, arriving with worry etched across his already lined face. He wore a worn jacket that had once belonged to his father, the smell of sea salt and diesel oil ever present on it. Ted stooped down to run a thumb along a deep gouge near the manifold. "Fourth piece of equipment in town that's been trashed this month alone. Wei Chang's boat trailer was wrecked last week, and old Mrs. DeWitt found her irrigation lines cut. I've never seen so much intimidation happen so systematically." Eamon nodded without a word. Inside, anger bubbled, but on the surface, he displayed only calm assessment. On the watery horizon, he could hear distant motorcycle engines revving in the pale dawn. The Black Anchor MC always made its presence known around this hour, patrolling the roads that led to the harbor, as if they owned them outright. Only a few minutes later, he saw three figures on motorcycles slow in front of his property, bikes roaring, exhaust pluming in the mist, no doubt admiring their handiwork. The riders wore black leather vests with a patch of an anchor entwined with barbed wire. One of them, a stout man with a graying beard, lifted an arm in a mocking salute when he spotted Eamon looking back. Before Eamon had time to react, another vehicle pulled up, one from the Bay Haven Harbor Patrol. Out stepped Lieutenant Trish Crowley, her neat uniform and short brunette hair whipped by the early morning breeze. She gave the departing motorcycles a cutting glare. "I heard about the tractor," she said by way of greeting, stepping over to examine the wreckage. "Just filed 2 other reports of sabotage. Always happens after someone refuses to pay those new fees to the Black Anchor MC. "Is the department doing anything about it?" Ted asked, frustration turning his voice hoarse. "We're not helpless, you know, but we need official help." Trish pressed her lips together, shaking her head in a short, emphatic motion. "Chief Alden says we lack direct evidence tying any specific club member to these acts. They're too careful. If there's no eyewitness or camera footage, we can't move in." The bitterness in her tone was unmistakable. She looked up at Eamon. "We both know how they operate. I'm not about to back down, but I need more than just suspicion. We have to catch them in the act or link them to something bigger. Otherwise, Alden will tie my hands forever." Eamon exhaled slowly, eyes scanning the horizon. The usual smell of brine and farmland now carried a sour tang of potential conflict. His mind, still finely tuned to threat assessment from years on the water, started piecing things together. He recognized the methodical approach. The Black Anchor MC targeted strategic resources, farms, fishing operations, essential equipment, then demanded money under the guise of security. They had done their homework, knowing which individuals would comply out of fear and which needed persuasion. A simple act of vandalism on Eamon's tractor might have been a key piece in a much larger puzzle. And if they thought they could scare him by breaking machinery, they had no idea who they were really dealing with. The next stop for Eamon that morning was the weathered barn on the far side of his property, a space he typically used for storing tools and feed. However, behind the mundane farm implements, he had a locked wooden cabinet that he rarely opened. As he unlatched it, he felt a faint tremor of old memories passing through his shoulders. Inside lay the gear he'd once relied on when storms turned deadly. Specialized rescue harnesses, a battered diving suit from his earlier days, and most notably a modified harpoon launcher designed to tag vessels or floating debris in for recovery under the worst conditions the Atlantic could conjure. Few around Bay Haven would ever guess the unassuming farmer had such a stash. He ran a calloused hand over the metal barrel of the launcher, recalling nights when he'd clung to the side of a ship in roiling seas, aiming the device at hulls that threatened to capsize, or even to breaching whales that needed to be steered away from fishing lines. Those experiences had earned him the reputation of being among the best marine rescue specialists in the Northeast. But they had also worn him down. Watching men vanish beneath the waves, or seeing children plucked from half-sunken boats in the final moment before disaster struck. Eamon had left that life behind, seeking solace in farmland and a quiet routine. Yet the skill set never left him, and the sense of duty that drove him to protect others still burned as fiercely as ever. Meanwhile, in town, tensions were rising. Ted Caldwell and other locals had begun organizing an informal meeting at Chang's seaside eatery, owned by Dawei and Liling Chang, who had run the place for decades. Their son, Wei Chang, and a resourceful fisherman with an eye on expanding the family business, had confronted some of the MC riders about the racket they were running. Wei's boat trailer was sabotaged soon after, sending a clear sign that defiance came with consequences. Word of these incidents spread quickly. Some older folks in Bay Haven remembered rumors of criminals occasionally trying to take advantage of the port's isolation, but they had never seen anything so well organized, so systematically ruthless. Trish promised to show up at the meeting that evening after her shift, although she confided to her father that it might accomplish little if Chief Alden refused to give the official backing they needed. "He keeps shrugging everything off," she lamented. "I can't tell if he's just spineless or if there's something else going on behind the scenes." Eamon suspected it was the latter. He recalled how, in his Coast Guard days, it only took one compromised official to let a smuggling operation flourish in remote harbors. If Black Anchor MC had a broader plan, they likely had local law enforcement under their thumb. Eamon closed the cabinet, his gaze lingering on the old harpoon launcher a moment longer. He decided not to move it yet. Better to keep the advantage of surprise. On the outside, he presented the same measured calm as always. But inside, he was methodically analyzing the threat, recalling how to focus under pressure, and anticipating the confrontation that would inevitably come. He refused to stand by while a gang of outlaws terrorized families who, like him, simply wanted a peaceful life by the sea. Chang's seaside eatery sat near the water's edge, where small waves lapped the rocky shoreline beneath a cluster of wooden pilings. Normally, the place bustled with cheerful conversation, the aroma of clam chowder mixing with fresh baked bread. That evening, the atmosphere was anything but festive. As Eamon and Ted entered, they found clusters of townspeople speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Wei Chung, a tall man in his late 20s, stood by the counter, head bent in intense discussion with a local fisherman. Liling Chang emerged from the kitchen carrying trays, still committed to feeding her guests even if they were too anxious to enjoy a proper meal. Trish was there, out of uniform, scanning the room with practiced vigilance. She approached Eamon the moment she spotted him, greeting him with a relieved nod. "So far, we've got about a dozen people here, fishermen, farmers, small shop owners," she informed him quietly. "Everyone's had their run-ins with the Black Anchor MC. Some have caved to the demands. Others are trying to hold out. We need a strategy to protect them." Standing at the center of the largest table, Dawei Chang raised a gentle but commanding voice. He'd run the eatery for over 30 years, through storms and floods, and was well respected by his neighbors. "We're not here to start a fight," Dawei told the assembled group, "but we cannot pay these people indefinitely. We'll lose our businesses. Soon they'll be charging for every net cast, every crate loaded. We need the authorities to step up." Ted Caldwell rubbed the back of his neck. "Far as I can tell, Chief Alden has no plans to escalate the situation. He either doesn't believe us, or he's turning a blind eye." At the back of the room, an older man named Giles Rockwell slammed his palm on the counter. "It's more than that. I saw Alden speaking privately with one of those bikers near the old fish processing warehouse. They look downright friendly. For all we know, he's on their payroll." Murmurs rose at that, and a few frightened glances flickered around. Bay Haven was a small, tightly knit place, and folks were accustomed to trusting their local officials. The idea that the chief of police might be compromised rattled them deeply. Trish took a deep breath before addressing the crowd. "I can't make official accusations without evidence, but the sabotage and extortion all tie back to the Black Anchor MC. No doubt about that. If some of you have already paid them, please step forward and talk to me. We can build a case with enough testimonies and proof of intimidation." Before anyone could respond, the restaurant's bell tinkled as 3 bikers sauntered in. One was Riptide Rogers, second in command of the MC, tall, with tattoos covering muscular forearms. Another bore a thick mustache and pockmarked cheeks. The third was lean, eyes flicking left and right as if casing the room for trouble. Riptide lifted his hands in mock surprise. "Oh, did not mean to crash a private party," he said, in a tone that suggested the opposite. "But when we see so many friendly neighbors gathered, we figure we ought to be a part of the conversation." A hush fell over the room, tension thick as cold fog. Eamon, seated near the corner, set his mug of coffee down on the table. He glanced at Trish, who was clearly bristling, but reining in her anger. Riptide's gaze roamed lazily until it settled on Dawei Chang. "Mr. Chang, I hear some rumor you're hesitant about our security fees. We're just looking out for the community, keeping trouble away from these docks. No reason for friction between us." Dawei's knuckles whitened around the coffee pot he held. "I've run this place for 30 years without needing outside protection," he said calmly. "And if trouble ever showed up, it was local folks who dealt with it, not strangers rolling in on motorcycles." Riptide feigned a sympathetic grin. "Times change, old-timer. Maybe if you folks want to keep running your businesses, you have to adapt to new realities." The subtext was crystal clear. Pay up or face consequences. Whether or not Chief Alden was complicit, Riptide had no qualms about threatening people in full view of a whole room. The biker's eyes slid over to Trish. "Lieutenant Crowley, so nice to see you here. We all appreciate the good work the Harbor Patrol does. Why, just this morning I heard your father's tractor broke down. Shame you can't investigate that more thoroughly." Eamon saw Trish's hand ball into a fist at her side. Something in him stirred, a protective instinct, honed by years of saving lives in savage seas. He rose from his seat slowly, stepping into Riptide's line of sight. "We're having a private meeting," he said in an even tone. "You're not invited." Riptide's grin widened. "Now, is that how you greet neighbors, Mr. Crowley?" The hush became absolute, as every set of eyes drifted from Eamon to the bikers, fully expecting an explosion. Eamon recognized that moment of taut silence as akin to the... Eamon gazed steadily at Riptide Rogers, remembering the old discipline from his Coast Guard days. Never show fear or anger to someone looking for leverage. Keeping his shoulders relaxed, he said, "We're not your neighbors. We live in Bayhaven. You live off intimidation." The words carried a matter-of-fact tone, making them sting even more. A flicker of something, surprise, maybe respect, passed across Riptide's face before he laughed it off. "Suit yourself, old man," Riptide said, flicking his gaze to the men behind him. "We were just leaving anyway. But I'll tell you what, keep an eye on that fancy harbor patrol job of yours," he added, directing the comment at Trish. "Would be a shame if you were reassigned to filing paperwork while more experienced officers handle real investigations." With that, the bikers turned and sauntered out, boots echoing on the eatery's worn floorboards. The door shut, tension releasing in a collective exhale. Ted Caldwell muttered, "This is going to get worse before it gets better." Around them, the small crowd broke into anxious chatter. Some wanted to fight back, others wanted to approach Chief Alden one more time, and a few seemed ready to pack up and move away from Bayhaven altogether. At the mention of a plan, all eyes turned to Eamon. Perhaps it was the quiet authority in his stance, or the way Riptide had seemed to regard him as a threat. Eamon felt the weight of that unspoken expectation. He'd never sought leadership. In fact, he'd moved to this quiet farmland to avoid the demands that once came with being a top rescue specialist. Nonetheless, he found himself pacing, mind turning over possible options. Finally, he looked to Trish. "If you can't charge them directly," he said, "maybe we can find a pattern to their extortion that leads to deeper crimes. Smuggling, stolen goods, bigger fish, something the state or even federal agents can't ignore." Trish nodded. "We suspect they're using the bay for more than scaring local fishermen. I've been hearing rumors of late-night cargo transfers, unregistered vessels sneaking in under cover of darkness. Could be drugs, stolen goods, or weapons. If we can link them to that, it might overpower Chief Alden's ability to brush off the case." Dawei Chang spoke with quiet determination. "We've all known these waters our whole lives. If they're moving cargo, we'll notice. My son Wei can keep an eye from his fishing boat. We can pass the word along to other captains too." Ted Caldwell added, If we coordinate, we can track any suspicious boat movement and gather real evidence. Photos, times, anything to prove they're up to more than just harassing folks. It was a provisional plan, but it gave everyone a glimmer of hope. They dispersed with some measure of renewed resolve, though the fear remained palpable. Eamon paused on his way out to help Liling Chang stack chairs. "Don't you worry about trouble tonight?" she asked softly. She was an older woman, usually brimming with warmth, and now wore lines of worry on her brow. He offered a reassuring half-smile. "I'm just a farmer, remember? They already damaged my tractor. Suppose there's not much left to break." Liling managed a small laugh, but they both knew the bikers could do much worse if given reason. As Eamon walked outside, rain clouds began drifting in from the horizon. Typical for late autumn in Maine, but still carrying the ominous sense that a storm might be on its way. In the distance, he caught sight of Riptide's motorcycle taillights disappearing, a small flash of red swallowed by the darkness. Over the following week, tensions in Bayhaven escalated almost by the hour. News of the meeting at Chang's Eatery and Eamon's refusal to bow to the Black Anchor MC seemed to spread like wildfire. It did not take long for small retaliations to sprout up around town. One morning, the windows of the local bakery were found smashed. No goods taken, just destruction for the sake of proving a point. Another fisherman discovered shredded tires on his truck. Trish tried to file reports on every incident, but was overwhelmed by the sheer volume. And each time she forwarded the complaints up the chain, she either received perfunctory replies or met with outright dismissal from Chief Alden. While this was happening, Eamon quietly activated old friendships. One of these was Luke Bear Hastings, a big, broad-shouldered man who had served with him in marine rescue operations years before. Bear had retired to a nearby coastal town, running a small electronics store and tinker shop that specialized in custom boat modifications. Eamon invited him over, explaining the precarious situation. Within days, Bear had installed discrete cameras along Eamon's property line, as well as at strategic vantage points around the farmland. The footage might come in handy if the MC tried another act of sabotage. The next secret meeting took place in Ted Caldwell's garage, well after midnight. Quietly, they assembled a small group: Eamon, Bear, Trish, Wei Chang, and two other trusted fishermen. Wei had spent several evenings following unmarked boats in the bay, logging their times and routes. He reported that on nights when the weather turned rough, these vessels always slipped into an isolated cove near the old cannery, an area that had once been used for fish processing. They never showed navigation lights, and they vanished just before sunrise, suggesting that their captains knew exactly how to evade official detection. At a makeshift table stacked with shipping charts and tide schedules, Bear pointed to a set of circles he had drawn. These spots align with channels too shallow for large boats, unless they're heavily modified. Yet here they are, gliding through as if they know every hidden reef and sandbar. That kind of knowledge usually takes years to learn, or it's passed on by locals. So either the Black Anchor MC recruited someone with intimate knowledge of this area, or they've done some extensive research. Wei nodded. One night I got close enough to see them transferring crates onto trucks. The crates looked specialized, temperature-controlled, or at least sealed tight. This is no small-time smuggling. Eamon shared a glance with Trish. So they're establishing an entire supply network right under our noses, using intimidation to keep the community in line while they run contraband. He exhaled, recalling other harbors he had visited where corrupt officials provided cover for illegal trade. Chief Alden might well be their inside man. If that's the case, any evidence we gather locally is at risk of being buried. Trish tapped her pen on the map. Then we need to gather incontrovertible proof and get it into the right hands. Maybe state or federal agencies who outrank Alden. But we've got to be careful. If they catch a wind of us snooping around, they'll clamp down harder or vanish altogether. Eamon gazed at the shipping routes again, gears in his mind turning. He thought of the old harpoon launcher in his barn and the stealth gear Bear had once used for nighttime water rescues. If the Black Anchor MC was counting on fear and secrecy, perhaps they wouldn't be ready for a small, specialized group that understood the ocean just as well as they did. Perhaps even better. The idea of returning to a life of covert operations and rescue tactics made his heart pound, a mix of apprehension and old pride. He glanced around the circle, seeing mutual resolve reflected in each face. They might be outnumbered, but they had local knowledge, each other's trust, and the advantage of surprise. The break they needed came sooner than expected, though not under ideal circumstances. Around midday on a stormy Tuesday, Wei Chang's fishing boat, the Blue Heron, limped back into Bayhaven's docks, battered far more than any typical squall should have caused. Eamon, Ted, and Bear rushed to meet it as Wei tied up, wearing an expression that blended outrage and fear. A chunk of the hull was dented, and part of the railing had been torn clean off. "What happened out there?" Eamon asked, helping Wei secure the mooring line against strong gusts of wind that whipped at their jackets. Wei let out a shaky breath. "I spotted one of those unmarked vessels near the old cannery channel. I tried to keep my distance, but they must have had some advanced radar or scanning device. Before I knew it, they were on me, shining blinding lights and coming dangerously close to ramming me. I had to veer into shallow water to avoid being hit head-on. That's when I clipped a submerged rock. My boat nearly capsized." Ted cursed under his breath, grabbing a repair kit from the dock box. "Damn it, they're getting bolder. They don't just want us to pay up. They want to drive us off the water altogether so they have free rein." Eamon helped Wei into the relative shelter of a nearby storage shed. Bear followed, scanning the horizon. "This means they're feeling pressure, or they wouldn't risk such open aggression. We must be closing in on something important. Otherwise, they'd just leave Wei alone." Trish appeared at a run, having heard the commotion. She frowned at the boat's damage. "I'll file a formal complaint, but I already know Alden's going to claim it was just an accident or that you strayed too close to restricted waters. They'll bury this, same as always." But Wei shook his head. "Not this time. I got one of their hull numbers partially before they used those lights on me. If we can cross-reference it with shipping registries, maybe we can figure out who owns that vessel, or at least track its origin." They decided to regroup that evening in the back room of Chang's eatery. Liling Chang greeted them warmly despite her obvious concern for her son's safety. Over steaming bowls of congee, they pored over port registries, maritime logs, and Wei's hastily scribbled hull numbers. Using a laptop connected to an old digital archive, Trish found a partial match to a vessel registered to a shell corporation. Layer after layer led them in circles, as though someone had gone to great lengths to hide the ship's true ownership. "That's sophisticated," Bear remarked, peering over Trish's shoulder. "Whoever's behind this has resources. They're not just a random biker gang that decided to run contraband. They've got corporate-level funding, maybe even bigger criminal connections across state lines." Eamon pressed his hands on the table, as if grounding himself before a storm he knew was coming. "That means it's going to take more than a local tip or a few snapshots to blow this operation open. We need something that the higher-ups, maybe even federal agencies, can't ignore. Something big, like documented transactions or intercepts." Wei looked pensive. "If we can get on their boat, or get a recording of them unloading." "But how?" Eamon didn't answer immediately. Instead, his gaze drifted out the eatery's rain-speckled window to the blackness of the sea. Memories flooded back, of slipping between waves under cover of darkness, of boarding drifting vessels for emergency rescues. A risky plan began forming in his mind. Sometimes, to protect people, you had to do what official channels would never allow. But if it kept the town safe and exposed the truth behind Black Anchor MC, he'd do it in a heartbeat. Night came with relentless rain and thunder rolling in from the Atlantic. While most of Bayhaven hunkered down in their homes, Eamon, Bear, and Wei boarded a small fishing sloop that belonged to one of Wei's trusted friends. The plan was straightforward, but high risk. Sail close to the cannery channel, hide among rocky outcrops, and try to capture evidence, photographs, videos, possibly even audio, of any late-night cargo activities. Trish, in her harbor patrol capacity, had to stay within nominal rules, so she agreed to remain on standby at a secure radio channel, ready to intervene if needed. She also needed plausible deniability to avoid direct disciplinary action from Chief Alden. The sea was rough, waves smashing into the hull, but Eamon felt a curious sense of calm in the chaos. In the meager light of the cabin, Bear assembled a night vision camera, an old piece of kit repurposed from their rescue days. Wei guided the sloop through the rock-strewn waters, teeth gritted, determined to avoid another collision like the day before. At one point, lightning illuminated the shore. revealing the silhouette of the disused cannery, a hulking structure against the gloom. A large security fence newly erected suggested the Black Anchor MC was heavily invested in keeping prying eyes away. They cut the engine, drifting with the current to avoid detection. The roar of the storm provided audio cover, but it also made visibility nearly impossible. Through the camera's night vision scope, Eamon caught glimpses of movement, a pair of men in rain gear hauling crates. Another figure, possibly Riptide Rogers, stood guard with a flashlight that pierced the darkness in erratic sweeps. Even from this distance, Eamon could sense the watchers were on high alert. Slowly, Way maneuvered the sloop behind a large rock formation. Bear zoomed in with the camera, capturing a few seconds of the crates being loaded onto a truck near the cannery's loading bay. He whispered, "They're definitely transferring something." Crates look reinforced. Metal corners, maybe climate-controlled. Another flash of lightning lit the sky, revealing more. A cluster of motorcycles partially sheltered by the cannery's overhang, and beyond them the black shape of a moored vessel with no running lights visible. For a moment, Eamon wondered if Breaker Knox himself might be there, overseeing operations. The Black Anchor MC's leader had stayed relatively elusive since arriving in Bayhaven, letting his subordinates handle day-to-day intimidation. By all accounts, Breaker Knox was ex-military, rumored to have been dishonorably discharged from a specialized naval unit. He likely possessed advanced maritime skills, which explained how the gang navigated the region so effectively. A crackle on their handheld radio startled them. Trish's voice came through. "I'm picking up some chatter on the official channels. Chief Alden is dispatching a patrol car to the cannery for a random security check. Keep your distance. This might be a trap." Eamon's heart thudded. If Alden was truly in the gang's pocket, the so-called security check could be a ruse to flush out any snoops, namely them. They powered off the camera's screen, relying only on the lens and battery to keep recording. Way shut down all lights on the sloop. Through the cascade of rain, they watched an approaching patrol car's headlights reflect off muddy puddles. Two uniformed officers stepped out, shining flashlights around as if going through a routine search. One of them paused by the truck, gave a cursory glance, then exchanged a nod with the man who was offloading the crates. After a minute or two, the patrol officers retreated to their vehicle and drove away, leaving the operation undisturbed. Bear let out a low hiss. "They're in cahoots. This is bigger than we thought." Eamon nodded, feeling a surge of grim affirmation. They had the evidence they needed to prove local police complicity with the gang's smuggling, at least if the video footage was clear enough. Yet, as if the night had more surprises in store, a sudden burst of gunfire rattled across the water. A bullet whizzed overhead, sending them ducking into the boat's hull. Someone had spotted a reflection or movement, or simply fired a warning shot. Way grabbed the rudder, guiding the sloop deeper behind the rock formation, while Bear clutched the camera, heart pounding. Eamon peered through the scope again, glimpsing men running toward the water's edge, flashlights slicing the stormy darkness. There was no doubt they'd come looking for intruders, and the rocky outcrops wouldn't hide them forever. "Let's get out of here before they start launching more than warning shots," Eamon murmured, adrenaline spiking. Way needed no further prompting. He restarted the engine and navigated through a labyrinth of rocks while Bear watched the camera feed. The swaying deck made filming nearly impossible, but it captured the frantic movements of the men on shore, proving they were armed and unafraid to shoot first. Over the wind's roar, the sound of revving engines grew louder, accompanied by headlights on a narrow dirt road that ran parallel to the water. The Black Anchor MC was mobilizing. Eamon considered the possibility they might have a second boat ready to pursue. That thought was enough to set his nerves on edge, but he forced himself to focus on survival. "Keep your heading steady," he told Way. "We'll circle wide, come around the far side of Bayhaven, and dock at the old marina near the breakwall." Bear clung to a railing as the boat lurched. "They can't see us in this darkness, especially with the storm. But if they have night vision gear like we do, they might track us. Let's hope their top-notch equipment is all invested in the contraband and not pursuit tech." They pressed on, waves slamming so hard against the sloop that it felt like an earthquake. Way expertly weaved through potential hazards, displaying the kind of seafaring instinct that only came from a lifetime on the water. For Eamon, it was a bittersweet flashback to his rescue days, where every moment was a test of skill and nerve. Eventually, the boat emerged from behind the rocky outcrops into a more open stretch of water. The overhead clouds parted just enough for the moon to shine, briefly illuminating their path back to the relative safety of Bay Haven Harbor. By the time they reached the old marina, the storm had eased to a steady downpour rather than a torrential assault. They tied up quietly, hearts still hammering, scanning the surroundings for any sign of pursuit. Nothing. The small harbor lay silent, water sloshing against wooden pilings, the lights of a few moored boats bobbing in the darkness. They hurried to a shack on the pier to review the camera footage, using a battered laptop that Bear had stashed in a waterproof case. Their hands shook with tension, both from the chase and the cold. With each passing minute, the weight of what they had captured sank in. Blatant evidence of large-scale smuggling, armed gang members, complicit police, and an unregistered vessel that could handle advanced cargo operations in stormy waters. It was enough to build a serious case if they could get it into the right hands. Trish arrived in her patrol car, face pale with worry. "I heard the gunfire over the channel. Are you all okay?" Bear played back the highlights of the footage, leaning in to show her. Trish's eyes widened at the clarity of the images, especially the part where uniformed officers casually chatted with known gang members. "Chief Alden can't bury this," she breathed. "Not when we've got them on video." Eamon exhaled, letting the immediate tension fade, though another wave of worry already rose in its place. "We can't trust the local station. We have to go higher. But the MC has to be aware now that we were spying. They'll come after us. We have to protect ourselves and the rest of the town." Trish's gaze flicked to the footage, then to Eamon's stoic face. "Dad, I know we can't just wait around, but we have to be strategic. They have resources, and they won't hesitate to retaliate." Eamon nodded in agreement. The fisherman-turned-farmer had spent decades facing down storms. This was simply a new kind of tempest, one that combined organized crime, corrupted law enforcement, and a hidden operation that stretched far beyond Bay Haven's quiet shores. The following morning, word of the firefight near the cannery reached the townspeople through rumor and hushed conversations. The details were murky. Most accounts referred to some crazy storm activity and the possibility of shots fired near the old cannery. Official statements from Chief Alden's office downplayed it, saying only that officers had investigated a possible burglary at the site. No mention of the Black Anchor MC or a clandestine smuggling operation. However, Eamon, Bear, and Way had the evidence. With Trish's help, they covertly prepared copies of the footage on multiple thumb drives and a secure cloud folder, ensuring that if the MC attempted to destroy one set, others would survive. Trish planned to contact a state-level investigator she trusted, someone who owed her a favor from a past case. Meanwhile, the Black Anchor MC made their presence more visible than ever. Breaker Knox was spotted around town, conferring with Riptide Rogers in open daylight, as if daring anyone to confront them. Their intimidation tactics grew bolder, but now the MC had a twist of caution in their eyes, as if aware they might be under surveillance. A handful of new members joined them, a small contingent of tough-looking individuals wearing the same black leather vests but bearing out-of-state license plates on their motorcycles. It felt like the gang was fortifying its position, preparing for a showdown. Dawei Cheng approached Eamon one afternoon after the eatery's lunch rush, a tea towel slung over his shoulder. "Word is, we're getting federal eyes on this soon," he said quietly. "Some folks say that if outsiders come in, we'll all be caught in the crossfire. It might get ugly." Eamon gazed over at the harbor, the water sparkling under a patch of sun. "It's already ugly, Dawei. We just haven't seen the worst of it yet." His mind churned with both dread and determination. Each day the MC remained in power. Local lives and livelihoods hung in the balance. Businesses were being squeezed, morale was plummeting, and families felt a creeping fear that they couldn't afford to stay in Bay Haven much longer. Trish arrived with grim news. "The lead I tried to pass up the chain got stalled. My contact at the state level says we need even more concrete proof, like identification of the contraband or a direct link to violent offenses. A firefight in the dark and suspicious crates might not be enough to authorize a raid." She shook her head in frustration. Apparently, the state police have their hands full. They want a slam dunk case, not something they have to assemble piece by piece. Bear scowled. So we need to wait until somebody gets killed or the gang leaves behind a smoking gun? That's not an option. We have to act before that happens. He thought a moment. What if we can intercept one of their shipments? Get actual evidence of what they're moving? That idea lit a spark in Eamon's mind. Intercepting a shipment was risky, but it might be the only way to catch the MC red-handed with tangible, illegal goods. The question was how to do it without being outgunned or tipping off their plan. Then Eamon thought of the harpoon launcher in his barn, the perfect tool for tagging a vessel so it could be tracked, or for hauling in a package if they managed to snag one while at sea. His old rescue instincts roared to life, carrying the memory of countless nights spent retrieving survivors from battered ships. If they were going to turn the tables on the Black Anchor MC, they would need every advantage the sea could provide. And Eamon Crowley knew how to work with the ocean like no other. Plans began to crystallize over the next 48 hours, culminating in a quiet gathering at the Caldwell Boathouse. Eamon, Trish, Bear, Way, and Ted Caldwell assembled near a large work table strewn with maps of the bay, weather forecasts, and scribbled notes about the MC's known activities. Several lanterns cast warm circles of light in the otherwise dim interior. Rain pelted the roof overhead, an intermittent drizzle that threatened to become heavier by nightfall. It was a classic Maine autumn evening, the kind in which fishermen typically hunkered down, telling tales about near-death experiences on the water. The objective was bold: identify the next nocturnal vessel arrival, figure out where the contraband would be transferred, and intercept it. Bear had a plan to modify a small runabout boat with a low radar signature, equipping it with cameras and a short-range thermal scope. Eamon would bring his harpoon launcher with special lines that could hook onto a crate or a boat hull if the opportunity arose. Trish, forced to maintain an official distance, would circle the area in her harbor patrol cruiser, ready to intervene if the gang attempted lethal force. Way and Ted would coordinate from the Caldwell Boathouse, keeping track of wind speeds, tides, and any signals from the watchers they had posted along vantage points on the shore. "I can't believe we're doing this," Ted said, folding his arms. "Feels like we're staging our own covert operation, but if it works, we'll have more than enough evidence to blow this wide open." Bear tested the battery pack on the boat's upgraded thermal camera. They've tried to use the sea as their secret highway. They don't expect a bunch of locals to outmaneuver them in their own game. But Eamon here is like Neptune incarnate when it comes to these waters. Eamon allowed a flicker of a grin. "Don't know about Neptune, but I've ridden enough storms to handle what's coming. And I've got you all to back me up." He turned to Trish. "Just stay safe. If anything seems off, if they show up with heavier firepower, disengage. No evidence is worth your life." She nodded, eyes shining with resolve. "Same goes for you, Dad." A poignant silence followed, father and daughter acknowledging the risk without saying it outright. They were stepping beyond the lines of normal procedure, driven by the urgent need to save their home. The group broke, each heading to finalize tasks, checking boat fuel, synchronizing radio frequencies, ensuring emergency flares were on hand. As they moved, Eamon felt a strange mixture of trepidation and calm focus, similar to the final briefing before a high-stakes rescue at sea. The adrenaline was there, but so was the clarity of purpose. The Black Anchor MC had brought a cunning operation to Bayhaven, but they had also awakened something powerful in the town's residents, a determination to defend their livelihood, their families, and their dignity. And at the heart of it all was Eamon Crowley, a man who had once battled nature's most violent tempests and emerged unbroken, stepping forward once more to protect the place he called home. By midnight, they'd be on the water or stationed nearby, waiting for the right moment to strike. Unbeknownst to the MC, local watchers had picked up chatter about a sizable shipment coming in that very night, something that would require multiple trucks. Rumors suggested it wasn't just small crates, but advanced equipment, possibly technology or materials far beyond mere narcotics. Whatever was inside, the MC was desperate to ensure its safe transfer. Eamon intended to use that desperation against them. As the rain thickened, he gently patted the old harpoon launcher resting in a watertight case. The sea rumbled in the distance, as if matching the unsettled tension coursing through the night. It was time to face the storm. Midnight arrived with a brooding sky over Bayhaven, clouds rolling in heavy from the Atlantic. Sheets of rain peppered the choppy waters, illuminated by occasional bursts of lightning that transformed the harbor into a theater of flickering light and shadow. At the Caldwell Boathouse, Eamon Crowley, Bear Hastings, and Wei Chong slipped on rain gear and checked their equipment one final time. Trish Crowley, wearing her harbor patrol uniform, stood off to the side, a pair of binoculars slung around her neck. She tapped the radio mic clipped to her collar, verifying the private frequency that would allow them to communicate without alerting Chief Alden. Despite her official role, she knew she was part of a clandestine effort that could get her fired, if not worse. Outside, a battered runabout boat bobbed at the pier, newly outfitted with dark matte paint and a minimal radar signature, courtesy of Bear's tinkering skills. It looked unremarkable at first glance, the kind of vessel local fishermen might ignore, but that was precisely the point. Hidden compartments inside contained battery packs for the thermal scope, along with a compact camera system wired to a laptop. A waterproof case held Eamon's modified harpoon launcher in extra lines. Almon, should the Black Anchor MC attempt another chase, they would find this boat much harder to pin down. All right, Eamon said, eyes scanning the bay. We have reliable intel that a significant shipment is arriving in the next hour or two. We'll creep along the coastline, keeping the lights off, and see if we can confirm their approach. If we spot their vessel, we'll track it to the Cannery Channel. Once they begin offloading the crates, we'll circle behind them, try to tag one of those crates with the harpoon, and drag it out to sea. He paused. That's if everything goes exactly right. Bear shrugged. It won't, he said frankly, but we'll adapt. We've done it before. He flashed a quick grin, reminiscent of their Coast Guard days when last-minute changes were standard operating procedure. Way brushed droplets off his slicker. If we get pinned down, I'll maneuver us into the rock formations. That's where local knowledge counts. Their fancy gear won't help them if they run aground on hidden reefs. Trish nodded, stepping forward to clasp her father's shoulder. I'll stay close by with the patrol boat, but not too close. If they spot me, they'll suspect a trap immediately. However, if you find yourself in real danger, call it in, and I'll come in with full lights and sirens. Maybe that'll give you enough of a diversion. Eamon looked into her eyes, the thunder echoing as if underlining the gravity of the moment. Stay safe, Lieutenant, he said, using her formal title. This will only work if we all get out of it in one piece. Within minutes, they boarded the runabout. The engine purred softly beneath the wind's howl. With practiced ease, Way guided the craft out of the boathouse slip, disappearing into the swirling mist that lay thick over the harbor. Lightning revealed the silhouette of a larger, official-looking patrol boat in the distance, Trish's shape visible near the helm. The only other signs of life were the faint glow-ins of street lamps lining the shore roads and the staccato hum of motorcycles echoing somewhere inland. Eamon inhaled the salty air, inhaling a rush of memories he had never been able to shake off. Monstrous waves, frantic mayday calls, the thrill and terror of operating at the ragged edge of safety. This time, however, the enemy was human, calculated, armed, and likely waiting for them with lethal intent. He steeled himself against the churning in his gut. Fear would not stop him from saving Bayhaven. They found the Black Anchor MC's ship before it reached the Cannery Channel, aided by the runabout's thermal scope that cut through the night's darkness and storm. Bear appeared at the laptop screen below deck, calling out instructions to Way at the helm. The faint outline of a mid-sized cargo vessel, running dark and silent, appeared near the horizon, hugging the coastline to avoid detection by open-sea traffic. Even at a distance, Eamon could make out the purposeful way the ship glided across the waves. Clearly, it had advanced navigational capabilities. Rain glistened off its metallic surface. An occasional lightning burst revealed a deck crew standing ready, silhouettes crisp against the black sky. They're heading exactly where we expected, Bear whispered, eyes not leaving the monitor. My guess is they'll cut engines near the cannery's submerged loading dock, then offload onto trucks waiting inland. This is a heavier load than last time. Probably bigger crates, more men. Eamon's breath quickened. They had to strike at precisely the right moment. Too soon, and they'd spook the MC. Too late, and the crates would vanish inside trucks bound for who knew where. He tightened his grip on the harpoon launcher's case, feeling the old spark of adrenaline. Way, keep us on a parallel course. Once they reduce speed, we'll inch closer. Lightning slashed across the sky, revealing a secondary vessel trailing the main one, smaller, maybe a security or escort boat. Eamon muttered a curse under his breath. If that smaller vessel ran advanced radar or carried armed guards, their plan just got significantly more dangerous. We've got to assume they'll have watchers posted on the shoreline too, he said. Try to keep us behind their blind spots. Bear frowned at the scope. They've changed their approach angle. Looks like they're heading for the channel from the north side, maybe to avoid the shallower reefs near the cannery's main entrance. That was a smart move. The MC must have studied the tidal shifts or consulted local experts. The group's cunning and resources once again showed their operation was no mere ragtag gang. About half a mile inland, a set of headlights shimmered on a narrow coastal road. Eamon suspected it was the convoy of trucks, or at least advanced scouts ensuring the road was clear. Glancing back through the runabout's tiny window, he caught a glimpse of Trish's patrol boat lights flashing once before going dark again. She was out there, moving in sync, ready to intervene at the first hint of gunfire. A gust of wind battered the runabout, and rain pelted the deck, forcing Way to correct course as they nearly collided with a jagged outcrop. Sorry, Way growled, teeth clenched. The waves are kicking up harder than predicted. We might see near hurricane conditions if this storm intensifies. That could work in our favor, Bear said grimly. If the weather gets too rough, they'll be forced to slow down. Eamon wiped water from his brow, surveying the ghostly outline of the coastline. Or they'll rush the job, he said. Either way, we need to be ready. His heart pounded against the wet fabric of his jacket. This was more than just a risky plan. It was a gauntlet thrown at the feet of an organization used to total control. Eamon silently reaffirmed his decision. If the MC refused to release their stranglehold on Bayhaven, he would do whatever it took to break them. The moment of truth arrived when the cargo vessel crept into the cannery channel, slowing to a near idle. Way cut the runabout's engine, letting the wind and current carry them close enough for Bear to zoom in with the thermal scope. Even through the sheets of rain, Bear's monitor showed the ship's crane mechanism swinging into position. Crew members hastily unlatched large, oblong containers, each roughly the size of a small car. They hoisted them over the side, where an accompanying tug, a squat, powerful boat, took on the cargo one piece at a time. The plan was obvious. Move the containers from the main vessel to smaller craft that could slip right up to the cannery's secret dock. Lightning illuminated the scene in surreal flashes. Eamon crouched low, wrestling the watertight case open to retrieve the harpoon launcher. Under normal rescue circumstances, he might have used this harpoon to tag drifting debris or attach lines to a foundering ship. Tonight, his target would be one of those crates, if he could land a shot that tethered it to their runabout. Bear, he called softly, keep that camera rolling. We need evidence of the transfer. Huddled under a canvas tarp for partial cover, Bear angled the lens, capturing video. The wind howled, sending stinging sprays of rain into their faces. Eamon peered over the gunwale, studying the frantic motion of the crew. Two men wearing black MC vests stood at the tug's helm, guns slung across their backs. On the main vessel's deck, more figures in slickers hurried about. Suddenly, he spotted a silhouette that stood out, tall, broad-shouldered, with a distinctive posture. Breaker Knox himself, likely barking orders, his voice lost beneath the storm's roar. They brought the boss, Eamon muttered. It meant the cargo was high stakes, something so critical that the MC's leader oversaw operations personally. Perhaps advanced weapons or contraband worth millions. Eamon's stomach clenched at the thought that they might be smuggling something even more dangerous, like toxic chemicals or cutting-edge technology. Over the radio, a low crackle signaled Trish's voice. We see you drifting. All quiet on the road so far. But watch out. There's a second convoy of trucks about a quarter-mile behind the cannery. No sign of Chief Alden, but he could be anywhere. Eamon acknowledged quietly. The next few minutes were crucial. As soon as the tug moved those crates to the cannery's subterranean dock, the evidence would vanish into old tunnels and trucks. They had to intervene now or lose their best chance. Gesturing to Bear, Eamon signaled that he was going to take the shot. Bear nodded, bracing the camera. With careful, deliberate motion, Eamon hefted the harpoon launcher, resting it on the runabout's railing. He exhaled, squinting through a waterproof scope as the tug came around with one of the largest crates suspended over its deck. His plan was to spear the crate's corner, then release a buoyant line that might allow them to pull it away or at least track it after it hit the water. But everything had to be perfect. He only had one harpoon loaded, with no time to reload before the MC would notice. He tracked the crate swinging in midair, waiting for that half-second of stillness when the crane cables would pause. The next lightning strike arced overhead, turning darkness into searing brilliance. Eamon's fingers squeezed the trigger. The harpoon shot tore through the storm, trailing a slender, high-tensile line behind it. For an instant, the world felt suspended in time. Eamon's aim was true. The steel tip embedded itself in the corner seam of the crate, lodging with a sharp clang that echoed across the channel. A second later, the line went taut, vibrating with the strain of wind, water, and the weight of the suspended cargo. On the tug's deck, shouts erupted. The crane operator jolted the controls, causing the massive crate to sway like a pendulum. Lightning revealed the stunned faces of Black Anchor crew members, some scrambling for cover, others peering into the rain to locate the source of the attack. The line shimmered in the gloom as it led straight back to Eamon's runabout, though they might not see it yet. "Got it," Bear hissed, capturing the moment on video. "That's evidence, and we can retrieve the crate if it goes into the water." Eamon quickly moved to secure the line. "Way, start the engine. Slow reverse. We need to drag that crate away before they figure out exactly where we are." Way obliged, revving the runabout's motor just enough to create tension against the crane's hold. The crate spun in the air, cables screeching in protest. Caught between the harpoon line and the crane hook, the large container jerked violently. Alarms and curses rang out from the tug. Eamon held his breath, hoping the harpoon's anchor would hold long enough to either tear the container free or snap the crane cable. If they could yank the crate into open water, they would have tangible, indisputable proof of the gang's contraband. A staccato burst of gunfire tore through the night. Bullets zipped overhead, and one ricocheted off the runabout's hull with a metallic ping. Eamon ducked, adrenaline roaring in his veins. "Bear, down!" he shouted, dropping to a crouch. He heard Bear grunt and scrambled behind a seat. Wade clenched the wheel, knuckles white, as he tried to keep the boat from spinning in the churning water. "They see us," Bear gasped. "We have to move." "No," Eamon snarled back. "We can't lose the line yet. Pull the crate into the water." Even as bullets whistled around them, he yanked on a mechanism that tightened the harpoon line's spool, forcing more tension. On the tug, shadowy figures returned fire, muzzle flashes cutting through the sheets of rain. The crane arm groaned under conflicting forces, swaying precariously. Then, all at once, the cable snapped with a crack like thunder. The giant crate plummeted into the channel, sending a titanic splash that nearly capsized the tug. "Go, go, go!" Eamon yelled. Way slammed the throttle forward, and the runabout lurched as it tried to haul the partially submerged crate away. Their boat strained under the load, the line trembling, but inch by inch they pulled the container out toward the open bay. Pandemonium exploded on the tug. Another volley of bullets peppered the waves, but the runabout's angle and the storm's fury shielded them from direct hits. A new roar joined the mayhem, a second boat engine. The escort vessel Eamon had spotted earlier now surged into view, prow cutting through the dark water like a knife. Its spotlight snapped on, illuminating the runabout's silhouette. Eamon's heart seized at the sight of the machine gun mounted on the bow. This was no mere civilian craft. The muzzle pointed their way, and he could almost sense the gunner's finger tightening on the trigger. In the distance, a burst of red and blue lights glowed through the storm, Trish's harbor patrol boat, screaming in at high speed. A siren wailed, a bizarre counterpoint to the raging thunder. "Patrol vessel, stand down and cease fire!" Trish's amplified voice boomed through a loudspeaker. Eamon prayed this would divert the escort boat long enough for them to get the crate to safety. But as muzzle flashes answered from the escort, he knew the final confrontation had arrived in full force. Trish Crowley's patrol boat, lights blazing, barreled into the channel. She had 2 junior officers aboard, men Eamon trusted from past run-ins with the MC, though they were not officially sanctioned to engage in any firefight. Regardless, they manned the harbor patrol's emergency spotlight, raking it across the tug, the main cargo ship, and the armed escort craft. A sharp voice blared once more over loudspeaker. "This is the Bay Haven Harbor Patrol. You are violating maritime law. Lower your weapons." The escort boat responded with a volley of tracer rounds that streaked through the storm, forcing Trish's craft to dodge. Eamon cursed under his breath, simultaneously trying to keep the crate from drifting away. The runabout dragged the container behind it, water surging around the crate's edges. The extra weight made them sluggish, vulnerable to pursuit. Yet if they abandoned the container, they'd lose their best evidence of large-scale, possibly illegal contraband. A flash of movement on the tug's deck caught Eamon's attention. Someone, he suspected Breaker Knox, grabbed a handheld launcher of their own. Before Eamon could shout a warning, a rocket-propelled projectile whooshed across the gap, narrowly missing Trish's boat and exploding against a rocky outcrop. Shards of rock and water rained down, the concussion blasting the patrol boat sideways. For a terrifying heartbeat, Eamon feared it might capsize, but Trish managed to correct course. "Damn it," Bear hissed, filming the chaos. "They're armed like a small militia. The feds won't be able to ignore this footage now." Way grimaced, jerking the runabout's wheel to dodge a floating chunk of debris. "If we live long enough to show it to them," he muttered. A thunderous crash echoed behind them. The main cargo vessel had started to move, its engines roaring as it attempted to escape the fiasco. Meanwhile, the tug struggled with its own damage, listing to one side after the massive crate had been yanked off its crane. Eamon realized they had an opening. With the tug partially disabled and the cargo vessel retreating, the escort boat was the only immediate threat. But that threat was lethal enough. Bullets whipped past again, striking water and sending up angry geysers. Eamon saw a figure hunched over the gun on the escort's bow, a man in a soaked MC vest, teeth bared in a furious snarl. Behind him, the outlines of at least two more operators rummaged for weapons. "Way, we need to lose the crate and focus on escaping," Bear shouted. "We'll never outrun that boat while towing this thing." Eamon's jaw clenched. The contraband crate was their golden ticket, proof that could get higher authorities involved, maybe even prompt a federal crackdown on the Black Anchor MC. But staying alive had to come first. Before he could make the call, a powerful wave rocked them, nearly pitching Bear overboard. The line to the crate, now under extraordinary stress, snapped with a resounding twang. The container drifted on the surface, half submerged but no longer tethered. "Line's gone," Eamon bellowed over the storm. A pang of regret seized him. His entire plan hinged on retrieving that crate, but the chain of events had spiraled beyond their control. "We do this the hard way," he growled. "Bear, keep filming. Way, get us clear of that gun." Trish's patrol boat unleashed a torrent of bright lights, focusing them on the escort craft's gunner. Another crack of thunder drowned out voices, but Eamon could see Riptide Rogers at the helm of the escort, shouting commands while scanning for a clear shot. The watery battlefield spun with raw fury, the line between air and sea blurred by sheets of rain. Surviving the night would be victory enough. A ferocious cat-and-mouse chase ensued through the channel. The escort boat, more heavily armed and faster, gained ground each time the runabout lurched over a wave. Way, determined not to lead them toward civilian homes, steered closer to the rocky coastline. Between blasts of thunder and lightning, Eamon spotted the half-submerged crate bobbing behind them. It drifted in the turbulence, battered by waves but still afloat. If they could just circle back for it once the escort was neutralized, or at least distracted, there might be hope of recovering it. On the horizon, Trish's patrol boat dueled with the tug, exchanging bursts of small arms fire and bright searchlight beams. The main cargo vessel was slipping away, hugging the ocean's gloom, likely bound for open waters where it would vanish. Despite the heartbreak of letting the ringleaders flee, Eamon's immediate focus remained on the escort boat. If it wasn't stopped, they would all be dead in minutes. Suddenly, a roaring crescendo of motorcycle engines echoed along the shoreline road. Headlights materialized on the cliff edges, confirming that more MC reinforcements had arrived. Eamon clenched his jaw. The storm made it difficult to see precisely how many, but the swirling beams of headlights suggested a dozen or more. They could only watch from land, though, unless they had another craft waiting at one of the smaller inlets. Bear pointed to the camera's monitor. If we lure the escort boat too close to those rocks, they might run aground. Problem is, we might as well. Wei, can you thread us through the reef? Wei's eyes were wide but resolute. I'll try. I know a narrow channel from my fishing runs. I usually only take it in calm weather, but it might be our only shot. Make it happen, Eamon said, hard hammering. He gave Bear a nod, who returned it with a grim smile. Their plan to intercept contraband had spiraled into a life-or-death chase, but maybe local knowledge of Bayhaven's treacherous waters would turn the tables. The runabout veered sharply toward a cluster of dark rocks jutting up through the crashing waves. Eamon's stomach dropped at the sight of them. One miscalculation, and they'd tear open the hull. Rain lashed the deck, stinging like needles. Behind them, tracer rounds from the escort boat lit the night in neon arcs. Eamon refused to look back. The only way to survive was forward. Wei angled the runabout into a narrow passage, foam churning on either side as black stone loomed overhead. The craft scraped something beneath the surface, a submerged ledge, but Wei quickly corrected course. The engine strained, the propeller thrashing bits of seaweed. For a terrifying moment, the runabout slowed almost to a stop. "Come on," Bear shouted, eyes darting between the escort boat's searchlight and the swirling sea. Then with a jolt, they cleared the pass, emerging on the other side of the reef. The escort boat, heavier and lacking local charts, hesitated. Its spotlight probed the rocky labyrinth, uncertain how to navigate without running aground. Eamon exhaled, adrenaline surging. We did it. We bought a little time. But the respite was temporary. If the escort crew was half as determined as Riptide Rogers, they'd find another route or risk ramming through. Over the radio, Trish's voice crackled. "Hang in there. I'm forcing the tug to retreat. I'll come for you as soon as I can." Glancing again at the camera feed, Eamon noticed the drifting crate still afloat in the violent surf near the channel's entrance. Recovering it felt like an impossible gamble, yet the thought of letting that evidence vanish into the depths gnawed at him. He set his jaw, feeling the storm's thunder resonate in his bones. One crisis at a time, he reminded himself. First, escape the reef alive. Then worry about securing the contraband that might save Bayhaven. Trish Crowley managed to drive the tug away from the cannery, using the threat of official charges and confiscation to force them out of the shallows. It wasn't a clean fight. Her patrol boat bore scars of bullet impacts, and her junior officers were visibly shaken. But the tug's crew eventually retreated, limping northward in hopes of rejoining the main cargo ship. That left Trish free to home in on her father's position near the reef. Concern thrummed through her every nerve. She knew Eamon and his allies were resourceful, but she also knew the MC's capacity for violence was far greater than anything Bayhaven had ever experienced. As lightning illuminated the turbulent horizon, Trish spotted the faint profile of the escort boat prowling around the reef's outer edges. Then she glimpsed the runabout's silhouette beyond a row of jagged rocks, half hidden by rain. "Patrol vessel to runabout," she called over a private frequency. "I see you. What's your situation?" Bear's strained voice answered. "We gave Om the slip, at least for now. But there's a crate drifting not far from your position. Eamon's convinced we can't let it sink or get recaptured. Any chance you can snag it with your boat?" Trish glanced at the storm-lashed waves. Visibility was near zero, and the crate itself would be heavy, difficult to maneuver. Yet if it truly held the evidence they needed to connect the Black Anchor MC to high-level contraband, this was the best chance to retrieve it. She also knew that going after it might put her squarely in the escort boat's crosshairs. "I'll try," she replied, "but be ready to help me if they start firing again." "Inbound," Bear said, and then static crackled, drowning out part of his response. Clenching her jaw, Trish guided the harbor patrol vessel around the outer reef, scanning for any sign of the crate. Her spotlight skimmed over the violent water, revealing foam, debris, and swirling seaweed. Finally, the beam caught the edge of the floating container. It bobbed precariously, half submerged, metal corners glinting faintly. Every wave threatened to overturn it or smash it against the reef. A sinking feeling told Trish they had only minutes before the container either tore open or disappeared into the depths. She maneuvered close, calling to her officers to ready grappling hooks and lines. Rain pelted the deck so fiercely that it felt like needles on her face. The loudspeaker's amplifier was partially fried from earlier gunshots, but she could still bark orders above the wind. her heart hammered with a mixture of fear and determination. This was no ordinary salvage mission. It was a direct challenge to the MC, a statement that Bay Haven was not theirs to control. Meanwhile, on a higher vantage of the shoreline, a cluster of motorcycle headlights converged. Trish caught sight of them in glimpses of lightning. The MC members watched from land, possibly waiting for an opportunity to strike if the container was brought ashore. She forced the thought aside and focused on the immediate task, hooking the crate. One of her officers finally secured a grappling hook onto a steel rung at the crate's top. The line went taut, but the force of the waves nearly yanked the officer overboard. Another helped hold him steady. "We got it," the officer shouted, wide-eyed. "But it's crazy heavy, Lieutenant." Trish braced herself at the helm. "Pull it in gently. If it's too heavy, we'll tow it behind us until we find calmer water." The crate lurched, shifting ominously. Water poured from vents along its sides. Whatever was inside, it was sealed well, perhaps too well. As they inched it closer, part of the container's corner rose above the surface, revealing foreign markings. A logo that looked governmental. Or maybe corporate. Trish's stomach tightened. Just how deep did this smuggling ring go? The runabout emerged from the reef passage, flanking Trish's vessel in the roiling sea. Eamon Crowley, drenched to the bone, stood at the helm with the harpoon launcher tucked away at his feet. Bear Hastings crouched near the camera setup, while Wei Chang navigated with grim concentration. They drew up alongside the harbor patrol boat, the two vessels maneuvering in tandem as best they could while the storm raged on. Trish's team had the crate half pulled onto a reinforced net they often use for search and rescue missions. It swayed and banged against the patrol boat's hull. Bear raised a hand in greeting, then gave Trish a thumbs up for securing the container. "Can we open it now?" he yelled over the wind. "Or do we get it to shore first?" Trish, teeth chattering, shouted back, "We should wait until we're in calmer waters. But if the storm doesn't ease up, we might not get the chance. We have to be sure it's safe to drag ashore. It could be hazardous materials." Eamon exchanged a knowing glance with his daughter. He recalled federal guidelines about unknown cargo, protocols typically requiring specialized hazmat teams. They didn't have that luxury here. "We do it now," he decided, voice resonating with the authority he once had when leading Coast Guard operations. "At least pry it open enough to see what we're dealing with. If it's chemicals or explosives, better to know before we move it." Trish gave him a curt nod. She ordered one of her officers to fetch bolt cutters from the patrol boat's emergency kit. The officer returned, fighting to stay upright on the slippery deck. With the runabout's spotlight added to the patrol boat's flickering beam, they could see the container's exterior more clearly. It bore no official labeling beyond a faded emblem in stenciled letters. Unfamiliar, possibly Eastern European in origin. Bullet scars pocked the sides, and a network of welding seams suggested it wasn't a factory-standard shipping crate. As the officer dug the bolt cutters into the crate's steel lock, Eamon scanned the horizon for any sign of the escort boat. The storm's fury had diminished visibility to near zero. Periodically, lightning revealed the rocky outline of the coast. He couldn't tell if the MC had pulled back or was regrouping for another assault. The uneasy sense of being watched nagged at him, though the raging wind and rain masked any distant engine noise. Finally, the lock snapped with a dull clank. Two officers strained to pry open a steel hatch. At first, only darkness and swirling water spilled out. Then, as they shone a flashlight inside, a collective gasp rose among the group. Rows of neatly packed canisters, each stamped with a foreign insignia and readouts that suggested advanced biotech or chemical contents. Tangles of wiring connected them to a central device that, in turn, hooked into a sealed refrigeration unit. Even more alarming were the small compartments lined with protective foam. Half were empty, half contained vials or sealed tubes. Whatever this was, it screamed of black market research, far beyond simple drugs or weapons. Bear, capturing the scene on video, let out a shaky laugh of disbelief. "This is bigger than I imagined. Like something out of a sci-fi lab. The MC is running some serious illicit trade." Eamon felt both vindicated and horrified. The crate's contents could be lethal, or at least dangerously valuable. No wonder Breaker Knox and his cohorts fought so fiercely. If word got out that Bay Haven was a conduit for advanced biological or chemical contraband, Federal agencies would descend in force. But a single slip, a spark, a misstep, could also unleash catastrophe in the harbor if the cargo was volatile. He placed a hand on Trish's shoulder, steadying her. "We have the proof we need," he said quietly. "Now we just have to get it and ourselves out alive." At that moment, a flash of headlights pierced the darkness on shore. Even through the swirling rain, Eamon recognized the shape of multiple vehicles arriving at the cannery. Dread clutched him. Reinforcements, presumably. The MC wasn't done fighting, and they'd come to ensure no one stole their prize crate. The war for Bayhaven was about to reach its most dangerous point. A flicker of lightning revealed several off-road trucks grinding down a muddy slope toward the cannery's hidden dock. Riptide Rogers, flanked by more MC members, hopped out of the lead truck. Behind him, a cluster of men with rifles sprinted toward the water, their shouts muted by the roaring wind. From their vantage on the boats, Eamon and Trish could see muzzle flashes as the gang started firing toward the channel, presumably hoping to hit anything that moved. "We need backup. This is beyond local patrol capacity," Trish muttered, reaching for her radio. She radioed a state law enforcement line, but the storm's interference crackled heavily. "Officer Crowley requesting immediate assistance. Armed confrontation at Bayhaven Cannery Channel. Multiple suspects. Heavy weaponry. Over." Static was her only reply. Bear angled the camera at the shore, capturing the muzzle flashes and the dark shapes of the trucks. "At least we have video. Even if we can't get them on the line, we'll have enough evidence to bury these guys if we get out of here." Eamon stood tall, the storm lashing his hair and coat, gazing at the swirl of water around them. "If we remain sitting ducks in the channel, they'll pick us off. We can't outrun bullets forever. But if we head further out to sea, the storm might tear us apart. Either way, we risk losing the crate or getting trapped." Trish's officers finished securing the container to the patrol boat's deck with multiple straps. One turned to her, eyes fearful. "Lieutenant, we can't tow this in these conditions. The wind alone might overturn us." Gritting her teeth, Trish yelled, "Brace it as best you can. We'll head for the old breakwater. The water's calmer there, and the stone barrier offers partial cover from gunfire." Eamon nodded in approval. The breakwater was a series of massive boulders arranged to protect the main harbor from waves. If they could tuck behind it, at least ground-based gunmen on the cannery shore would have a harder time getting a clear shot. He waved away. "Stay on our flank. If that escort boat reappears, do whatever it takes to keep them off us." They set off, the harbor patrol vessel chugging forward with the runabout close by. Gunfire spat from the shoreline, but most rounds splashed harmlessly into the sea, lacking the range or clarity to hit the moving targets. Rain hammered the decks in unrelenting sheets. The crate rattled with each wave, metal on metal, as if it might break loose at any second. At last, they rounded the tip of the breakwater. Immediately, the waves calmed a fraction, and the rocky barrier provided some relief from direct line of sight. Eamon exhaled, shoulders aching from tension. He glanced at Trish, who keyed her radio again, and repeated her emergency request. Still no confirmation. The storm had effectively cut them off from any reinforcements. Bear peered over the breakwater's edge, camera rolling. His expression turned to alarm. "Eamon," he said hoarsely, "take a look." Eamon followed his line of sight. There in the distance, a second set of headlights and swirling red and blue lights coalesced. At first, he thought help had arrived, but a closer look revealed a police SUV leading two unmarked vans, and stepping out of the driver's seat was none other than Chief Garvey Alden. That the police chief was flanked by men in MC vests told Eamon everything. Alden had come to finish this personally, ensuring no survivors left to expose him. Thunder rumbled overhead, and Eamon's hand instinctively gripped the harpoon launcher. If Alden had thrown in his lot with the MC, Bayhaven's last hope rested on Eamon's unwavering resolve. Chief Alden took position on a slight rise overlooking the old cannery dock, scanning the breakwater with a pair of binoculars. Lightning revealed his grim expression, a man with much to lose if his involvement came to light. Beside him, Riptide Rogers gestured angrily at the water, pointing toward the glow of the patrol boat's spotlight. The convoys of MC enforcers fanned out behind them, rifles at the ready. It was a small army set against two beleaguered boats, pinned down by a storm and weighed down by a hazardous crate. "Patrol vessel, come in!" Alden's voice crackled over an open channel, unexpected and jarring. Trish jumped, then hesitantly reached for the mic. Eamon placed a hand on her shoulder, cautioning her to remain calm. Trish pressed the transmit button. Bay Haven Harbor Patrol here. Chief Alden, stand down. You're abetting a criminal organization in open conflict with the law enforcement. Lay down your arms and surrender. Alden's tone dripped with condescension. Lieutenant Crowley, you're disobeying direct orders. You've allied yourself with vigilantes interfering in an authorized operation. Hand over the stolen cargo immediately, or we'll be forced to take lethal action. Every muscle in Eamon's body tensed. Alden's blatant lies about an authorized operation underscored how deep his corruption ran. Trish fired back. We have documentation and footage of you coordinating with these criminals. This is your last chance to de-escalate, Chief, before higher authorities get involved. Alden let out a snort of laughter that crackled through the radio. You think you've got something big enough to bring me down? The real power behind these shipments isn't going to let a handful of fishermen and a disgraced rescue officer ruin their investment. I'm offering you one chance. Leave the crate. Sail away. Forget this ever happened. A pause. Lieutenant, don't throw your career and your life away. Eamon watched the shoreline as the MC's men spread out, forming a perimeter that covered every angle of the breakwater. The storm's fury continued unabated, but the immediate question was whether or not they could even attempt a dash for the open sea. The waves beyond the breakwater still roiled like a beast. If they ventured out with the crate, they might capsize. If they stayed, Alden's forces would eventually close in. For a brief moment, hopelessness welled up in Eamon's chest. Then he saw the worry and determination in Trish's eyes and remembered why they had come this far. He took the mic from her hand, speaking calmly and clearly. Chief Alden, this is Eamon Crowley. I've spent my life pulling drowning men out of storms. You're more lost than any victim I've ever rescued. You're clinging to a criminal empire that's sinking fast. Let go while you can. Silence filled the radio waves for a moment. Then Alden's voice returned, colder than ever. So be it. Men, prepare to move in. Everyone on that boat is expendable. The channel went dead. More headlights flickered along the shore as additional vehicles arrived. Eamon felt the runabout shift beneath him. Way, gripping the wheel, cast a questioning glance. They all knew they couldn't wait for rescue that might never come. The final stand was here, at Bay Haven's breakwater, under the raging storm. Steeling himself for the clash, Eamon readied the harpoon launcher one more time. If Alden wanted a fight, he'd get one, and he'd learn exactly why the ocean always belonged to those who understood its power best. Sheets of rain hammered the boats, turning decks into slick battlefields. The MC enforcers on shore advanced to the edge of the breakwater, rifles raised. From somewhere behind them, Chief Alden barked orders, telling them to open fire as soon as they had a clear shot. Muzzle flashes cut through the gloom, rounds pinged off the rocks, some zipping overhead or plunking into the water near Trish's patrol boat. Trish's junior officers exchanged fearful glances, but she steadied them. Return fire only if you have a clear target. Keep them pinned down, but don't risk hitting civilians if any are forced to watch from their homes. A staccato burst rang out from one of the patrol officers, who kneeled behind a steel panel. The muzzle flash revealed the MC scattering for cover. Meanwhile, on the runabout, Eamon shoved a fresh line cartridge into his harpoon launcher. Bear crouched next to him, capturing everything on video. The swirling storm, the crate strapped to the patrol boat, and the pitched firefight on shore. Way gripped the helm, inching the runabout into a better vantage. If we can get an angle on Alden or Riptide, maybe we can scare them into backing down, Way said through clenched teeth. Eamon peered through the gloom. We're outnumbered. We need a show of force or a strategic advantage. His gaze flickered to the breakwater's design, towering boulders arranged to divert waves, but also forming hidden pools and steep drop-offs. An idea sparked. Way, swing around that far cluster of rocks. See if we can flank them from the water side. Bear, stay low. They maneuvered away from the patrol boat, hugging the giant boulders. Bullets ricocheted, occasionally striking the runabout's hull. Eamon steadied his launcher. Through the swirling haze, he spotted Riptide Rogers standing behind a truck's open door, rifle muzzle blinking with each shot. Another figure dashed closer to the breakwater, brandishing a shotgun. The fight was quickly escalating into a lethal standoff. Lightning blazed overhead, unveiling a fleeting but perfect angle. Riptide's side was momentarily exposed. Eamon inhaled, braced the harpoon's stock against his shoulder, and squeezed the trigger. The harpoon didn't have an explosive tip. It was designed to embed, not detonate. But if it struck near Riptide, it might pin him, or at least terrify him enough to disrupt his aim. The harpoon streaked out, a line hissing behind it. Thunder drowned the sound of impact. Through the gloom, Eamon saw sparks fly off the truck's metal door. Riptide howled in shock, stumbling backward as the harpoon lodged in the vehicle frame just inches from him. The near miss visibly rattled him. He scrambled away, glancing around wildly for his unseen attacker. "That'll keep him guessing," Bear murmured, filming the aftermath. Indeed, the MC's return fire faltered for a few seconds, buying Trish's patrol boat time to reposition. Eamon allowed himself a breath of satisfaction, though he knew they were still in dire peril. Another rocket or well-aimed shot could end this at any moment. Suddenly, the radio crackled. Weak but discernible. A new voice came on the line. "Bayhaven Harbor Patrol, this is State Tactical Unit inbound. We received partial transmission about multiple hostiles at the cannery. ETA 15 minutes. Hold your position." Relief sparked among Eamon, Trish, and the others. State police reinforcements were coming, albeit not soon enough to guarantee an easy escape. The MC evidently heard the chatter, or saw the new lights crossing a distant bridge, for they intensified their assault. Olden likely realized his window to silence the witnesses was closing fast. Storm or no storm, this was going to end tonight. Gripping the slick harpoon launcher's handle, Eamon locked eyes with Way, Bear, and then across the water at Trish. They'd stand together, farmers and fishermen turned defenders, drawing on knowledge of sea and shoreline that no criminal syndicate could match. Their fate and Bayhaven's future hung on the next few minutes. When the state police convoy finally materialized in the distance, sirens welling through the storm, the morale on shore and at sea shifted dramatically. Chief Alden and the Black Anchor MC had banked on local isolation and compromised law enforcement. Now their advantage melted away under the glare of approaching headlights and the unmistakable thunder of official vehicles. Riptide Rogers, visibly panicked, conferred with Breaker Knox, who had reappeared behind a truck, brandishing a sniper rifle. Meanwhile, Alden pounded a fist against the side of his SUV in frustration. Shouts filled the air as the MC debated whether to flee or mount a final stand. Eamon spotted the confusion. Through Trish's patrol boat loudspeaker, he shouted, "This is your last chance. Surrender peacefully and nobody else has to die. The State Tactical Unit is moments away." His voice boomed across the breakwater, competing with thunder. He'd seen situations like this before. Criminals faced with overwhelming odds sometimes surrendered, but if they were desperate or believed they had no future, they might choose a bloodbath. The answer came in a shrill cry from Riptide. "Black Anchor doesn't run. We end this now." Fire spouted from his rifle muzzle, forcing Eamon to duck. The final firefight erupted, more intense than before. Trish and her officers responded with measured shots, trying to pin down the bikers. Eamon, Bear, and Way used the runabout as a mobile firing platform, though they had limited ammo and zero armor. Bullets ricocheted, sending sparks dancing off wet stone. Adrenaline hammered in Eamon's chest as he fired a single shot from a rifle Bear had brought, forcing an MC enforcer to take cover behind a collapsed portion of dock. In the midst of the chaos, lightning ripped across the sky, illuminating Breaker Knox's imposing figure. He leveled the sniper rifle at the harbor patrol boat, presumably aiming to take out the crate or the engine. "Trish!" Eamon roared, trying to warn her. Time slowed as a muzzle flash lit up Knox's face. The bullet streaked across the water, striking the crate with a metallic crunch. Steam hissed from a ruptured line, fluid leaking out in an acrid-smelling spray. The crate's refrigeration unit sputtered, sending out sparks. Trish dropped behind the console, heart pounding. "The crate's compromised," she yelled. One of her officers gagged, coughing at the pungent chemical odor. Whatever was in that container might be toxic if exposed to open air. Alarm jolted Eamon as he realized that, in addition to the gunfight, They now risked unleashing a potential biohazard into Bayhaven's waters. Desperate, Eamon shouted at Bear, "We have to get that crate off the boat before it fully ruptures. Help them cut it loose." Bear stared at him. "And let it sink?" Eamon nodded grimly. "Better it's lost at sea than contaminating the entire harbor, or falling back into MC hands." Bear gave a quick nod and radioed to Trish, who agreed. The officers on board sliced through straps and lines holding the compromised container, each slash accompanied by choking fumes. Then, with a final push, they dumped it overboard. The crate vanished under the crashing waves, leaving behind an oily sheen on the surface. Alden's voice rang out over the storm, a high-pitched wail of frustration. "You idiots! That shipment is worth more than your whole miserable town." More gunshots spat from the MC, their rage now unconstrained. But the wails of sirens drowned them out. Flashing red and blue lights grew brighter behind the cannery, followed by the distinct crackle of police loudspeakers ordering everyone to stand down. Eamon, chest heaving, glanced at Way and Bear. They looked as exhausted as he felt. The state police had arrived in force, and the MC's hopes of a quick victory evaporated. Now the criminals had no easy escape. The sea raged behind them. The breakwater protected the harbor, and troopers were rapidly encircling the cannery from land. A sense of grim relief washed over Eamon. He knew the fight wasn't over, not until every biker laid down arms or was taken into custody. But at least Bayhaven wasn't alone anymore. Dawn broke over Bayhaven in streaks of purple and gray as the remnants of the storm finally passed. The morning light revealed a scene of battered vehicles, pockmarked docks, and shattered glass that testified to the violence of the previous night. State police had cordoned off the cannery area, troopers methodically sweeping for suspects, weapons, and evidence. A line of MC members sat handcuffed on the wet ground, guarded by stern-faced officers. Some glowered in defiance. Others stared blankly, the shock of defeat sinking in. Chief Alden was among them, stripped of his badge, wrists bound behind his back. He refused to look at Trish Crowley as she walked past with a pair of state investigators. Whenever he met her gaze, she'd see only hatred and regret swirling in his eyes. Eamon Crowley watched from the sidelines, an ache in his shoulder where a bullet had grazed him during the firefight. He felt no triumph in seeing Alden's downfall, only the relief that Bayhaven's nightmare might finally be over. Riptide Rogers and Breaker Knox had been captured during the final sweep when they tried to escape by stealing a small fishing boat. The storm and local knowledge of the tides foiled them, forcing them ashore, where waiting troopers subdued them. Wei Cheng stood nearby, arms crossed, observing as the men who had terrorized his family were marched away in shackles. His boat, the runabout, lay moored behind him, scarred by bullet holes but still afloat. Bear Hastings toted his camera equipment, reviewing footage with a state investigator who seemed stunned by the scale of what he saw. "You're saying they were smuggling advanced biotech materials?" the investigator asked, eyes wide. "That's above my pay grade. We'll need federal agencies on this. The damage to that crate might have spilled something toxic." Eamon overheard and sighed. Losing the crate was a blow to any definitive lab analysis of the contraband, but the video evidence combined with the MC's brazen assault was enough to prompt a massive criminal investigation. Federal hazmat teams were already en route to check the water for contamination. A few yards away, Trish Crowley conferred with her fellow harbor patrol officers. They congratulated her on exposing Alden, though she was certain a complicated web of inquiries would follow. She'd likely face internal reviews for her unauthorized actions. But with the avalanche of evidence gathered, especially the footage of Alden's open collusion, she hoped she could keep her job. More importantly, she had reclaimed her honor as a law enforcement officer, standing for truth rather than corruption. At the water's edge, Eamon joined Trish, draping an arm around her shoulders. They stared across the quiet harbor. The breakwater, battered by waves through the night, now shimmered peacefully under the new day's light. "I'm proud of you," Eamon said softly. "You risked everything to protect Bayhaven." She gave a tired smile. "Couldn't have done it without you, Dad, without Bear and Way and everyone else who stood up." Her gaze drifted over to the wreckage near the cannery. "So many bullets fired, so much fear stirred up. But I think we proved something last night. That people around here won't let outsiders come in and tear us apart." Eamon nodded. In the aftermath of the storm and the firefight, Bay Haven's residents began emerging from their homes and shelters. Some came to see the arrests, others to help clean up. Soft conversations carried on the breeze, expressions of relief and guarded optimism. There would be scars, physical and emotional, but also a renewed sense of unity. The ocean, once the stage of fear and conflict, beckoned with gentle waves as if encouraging them all to start anew. In the weeks that followed, Bay Haven bustled with activity on multiple fronts. Federal investigators combed through the cannery and its hidden tunnels. Local volunteers repaired storm damage and bullet-ridden docks. And the Harbor Patrol underwent a sweeping internal audit that led to the dismissal of half a dozen officers tied to Alden's corruption. Trish Crowley, however, was vindicated. Her evidence and first-hand testimony cemented the case against the Black Anchor MC. Promotions were hinted at, though Trish wanted no fanfare, just a chance to serve with honesty. The captured MC members faced a battery of charges: racketeering, extortion, attempted murder, weapons violations, and conspiracy to traffic illicit biotech materials. Breaker Knox and Riptide Rogers, defiant to the last, were shipped off to federal holding facilities. Chief Alden struck a sullen figure as he faced trial, rumored to be negotiating a plea in exchange for revealing higher-level players in the smuggling network. But the official rumor mill suggested even bigger fish were circling: shadowy financiers who might have orchestrated advanced contraband shipments not just in Maine, but across the entire Atlantic coast. While federal agencies continued poking around, life in Bay Haven slowly returned to its natural rhythms. Fishing boats once again sailed at dawn, hauling in nets of kite and haddock. The local farmers mended fences and tractors, preparing for the next planting season without the fear of sabotage. Many credited Eamon Crowley and his allies for leading the town through its darkest crisis in years. Some even teased that Eamon should run for mayor, but he waved away such notions with a modest chuckle. All he wanted was a peaceful existence among the fields, the sea, and the people he cared about. Down by the rebuilt section of dock, Eamon stood with Wei Chang and Bear Hastings, examining the runabout's patched hull. Bear slapped a fresh coat of paint over the bullet gouges, whistling an off-key tune. Wei fiddled with the engine, making small improvements gleaned from local mechanics who had volunteered help. "She might not look pretty," Wei said, "but she's still seaworthy." "We gave those MC punks a run for their money in this old tub," Bear added with a grin. "And that footage? It's going to change Bay Haven's reputation. They won't dare call us a backwater after seeing how we defended this place." Eamon set a hand on the railing, gazing out to sea. "Let's hope it stays quiet," he said softly. "I've had my fill of storms and firefights." In truth, he felt a subtle pull of nostalgia for the adrenaline of rescue missions, but also knew he deserved the quiet days he had once sought when retiring here. A familiar voice called out from behind. Trish walked up wearing her Harbor Patrol uniform, a new lieutenant's badge gleaming brighter than before. "Dad, word just came in. The federal water quality tests show minimal contamination. Whatever was in that crate seems to have dispersed or lost potency. We got lucky." Eamon exhaled, relief flooding him. That could have been a catastrophe. He turned to her with a gentle smile. "How about you? You holding up after everything?" She shrugged. "I'm dealing with paperwork and depositions, but I'm good. Better than good, actually." She looked around at the tranquil harbor, sunlight reflecting off rolling waves. "We protected our home, and we reminded everyone that farmers and fishermen aren't easy targets." Bear cleared his throat. "Still, keep your guard up. Word travels fast, and if that smuggling network wants revenge," Trish nodded, "we'll be ready. Bay Haven's stronger now. That's enough for me." Eamon took in the scene, friends sharing a moment of calm, the Atlantic horizon gleaming with endless possibility, the battered but resilient dock standing firm. The weight of the last few weeks lingered, but so did a profound sense of gratitude. In the hush of the morning tide, Eamon Crowley realized that sometimes, when you stand against the storm, be it wind, wave, or criminal threat, you discover the unbreakable spirit of the place you call home. And for Bay Haven, that spirit would endure, come what may. Looking back on everything that happened, from the first act of vandalism to the final heroic confrontation, it's clear that Bay Haven's triumph was never just about besting a ruthless gang. It was about rekindling the community's faith in itself. Farmers and fishermen, old friends and new allies, all stepping up when it mattered most. By banding together, they proved that homegrown courage could outperform even the most dangerous foes, and that hope can rise like the sun after any storm. This story reminds me that even when the odds seem impossible, ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things. Maybe that's what makes stories like this so unforgettable. They remind us of our own hidden strengths. I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of Bayhaven's struggle resonated with you the most? Drop a line, lend your perspective, and let's keep the conversation alive. Thank you for joining us. Together, we'll sail on to more stories worth telling.